I want to talk about how um, racist black groups and sexist female groups team up, and I want to talk about a historical context and how historically, an alliance between women and blacks had actual, you know, it was grounded in uh, a common problem. So when you talk about the right to vote, uh, being a second class citizen or, not a citizen at all, historically, I could see how they had real grievances. I would expect some kind of alliance between the two. And, I wouldn't be surprised if they were having a lot of relationships with each other and stuff. And because, you know, they would be fighting against a lot of people that were not being we're not being just, and the foundation of a relationship is righteousness. So historically, I could see teaming up between uh, women and blacks. Now in the present day, I don't see why, you know I don't see why that would be happening, because that stuff's already been dealt with. So what are these current movements that you see? Why does it seem that these movements are still teaming up with each other? Well, they're using excuses from the past to act like there's still a present problem, and to try to gain power, and you know make allegations against people that are not doing anything wrong. um, use intimidation, they use violence and stuff. So present day, these complaints being presented by these groups, I don't see any footing. um, Actually, I see footing in the opposite direction. um, with the DEI stuff, that's racist. Okay, that's discrimination based on gender and race. So, you know, present day, I could see how um, white men have something to complain about. Okay, it's not good for industry. There's that they might act like they're trying to rebound from past injustices, and they need some kind of reparations or some kind of special treatment in the professional world and education and all this stuff. Well, at what point is it going to stop? Okay, it's got to stop. The I think it needs to stop now. It doesn't make sense. So, at some point you're just gonna be like, look, I am where I am. I'm not gonna keep fighting, over some kind of repayment for history. Like, I'm just gonna accept that we all have equal rights at this point where we're at. Okay, things are fair, and I need to work my way up. I can't do anything about my genetics. I can't do anything about my location. I can't do anything about what I've been born into. But things are fair on paper as of now, and I just have to work. I have to use the opportunities that I have. Different people are born into different opportunities, different countries. Okay, you don't see all these countries that aren't as successful as the United States. You're not going to agree with them all asking for some kind of reparations because of economic competition and stuff, and just the way things played out in history. No, you have to just start with a clean slate. Okay, nobody's being blamed for anything anymore. All right, we all have equal rights now. Okay, we're in our positions that we're in. All right, it's just the way things played out in the universe. Decisions were made. Here we are. Everything's fair. We deal with what we have. Okay, we're not asking for things from people that didn't do anything to anybody. All right, they're like you're saying their ancestors did stuff, and it's not even making any sense, because all kinds of people's ancestors did similar things. And you're just blaming the people that came out into a position of having a lot of resources and education and stuff. So when you see these black groups and these female groups teaming up, okay, you see these ideologies intertwining, you see these relationships happening, and evident sexist and racist things being said about why they're in a relationship with each other. Yeah, there's some kind of historical context, to an alliance between those two groups, but present day just doesn't make any sense. Okay, just you have to move on. We have to start over. Okay, we can't just keep asking for like reparations and stuff and special treatment from people that were not actively participating in these decisions that caused oppression. So DEI is nonsense, all that stuff where you're, in education and business and all that. That's horrible. All right. You just got to start where you're at. Okay, understand that the world as a whole, has had bad decisions made by leadership and oppressive governments and groups and stuff, and you just have to start where you're at. All right, you're not going to encourage everybody to start asking everybody for everything, and just seriously, DEI, the education thing, bad for business. Okay, bad for everybody. Doesn't make sense. It's contradictory. It's bothering people. There are tons of other examples that I could use to argue what these people are trying to achieve. So like when you talk about conflicts between nations, land being acquired, resources being acquired, are you going to make all these people give up what they've acquired just because, historically it was acquired oppressively, but even though that was the norm historically, like all across the board, but historically it was acquired oppressively, and you just want some kind of repayment, and you're asking the descendants of the oppressors that are not actively oppressing, okay, the descendants that have been responsible for creating the fair world that we live in, well, in at least the Western world. So these descendants that you're trying to punish for what their ancestors have done are the ones that are responsible for your freedom. Okay, they're the ones that made the decision. They didn't fight you. All right, they sided with you. Okay, it's not like they were just scared of your power and your rebellion. Okay, a lot of them actually care, and they've changed the world. So you need to stop asking these descendants to pay you. You're talking about all these taxpayers paying you stuff, and like them giving up their freedom to have a fair fight in the professional world and the education system to pay you for something that was the social norm all across the world, that their ancestors we're the ones that stopped all this stuff. Okay, we were the leaders of the free world. Okay, you're asking the nation that stopped all this stuff and saved your people to like give you more? Like, it just doesn't make sense. So when you talk about conflicts between nations, you don't see the nations, at some point the nations just have to start where they're at. Okay, no more conflict, no more asking for repayment or whatever. We're just going to start where we're at. We're going to keep the land we have. Okay, and we're just going to be fair from this point on. Okay, there are tons of examples where you just have to start where you're at, okay, and make things fair. Not asking for any kind of special treatment, and just move on. So that's where we're at with the DEI stuff. That's a lot of the reason why you see these alliances and with black groups and female groups. It could stem from this historical, context. But at this point, they don't have anything to stand on. And they're aware of that a lot, and they're just being selfish and violent and stuff, and they use each other for intimidation.